Great. Welcome everybody to our third annual CSU Supplemental Instruction Symposium. We're excited to have this event once again. Some of you may remember, of course, we had this last year. It's third annual, and the year prior. We started off year one with a face-to-face event at the Chancellor's office, about 60 people attending in person. We grew to about 120 attending virtually last year, and I'll give you a snapshot of numbers coming up in just a couple slides here. I'll introduce myself briefly. I'm Brett Christie, and I'm with CSU Academic Technology Services. I've been in this position for, going on 8 years now. Before that, worked at Sonoma State for quite a number of years, and before that, Dominguez Hills, so a long time in the CSU. And just really excited about this program and the efforts that we have going through with everyone that we're going to talk about today. Okay. And just to kind of go over some of our goals here, we will provide context regarding supplemental instruction. I know there will be some repeat-based content from the prior years. That's because we have a much larger audience. We have people that are new. We have people that are sort of discovering or learning about supplemental instruction. So we do want to make sure that we cover some groundwork. But we also have a couple of presentations that kind of push the boundaries or go into newer areas that we haven't covered in the past. We have the International Center for SI at UMKC as part of our session today. We also have a large CSU supplemental instruction community, and many of those people are participating either as presenters or in the audience with their campus folks. We're going to feature highlights of a few of our standout SI programs. As time has been progressing, we've had more and more standout SI programs, but today we're going to be able to just feature a few of them and some of their aspects that are so strong. We also want to make sure this year, even more so, to feature the critical role that students play in this program, the SI leaders. You'll find out what that term is and who those folks are, and of course, the student participants. This is really a student-driven, student-focused student success program. And then through the program, we also want to have some opportunity for engagement. Please use the chat throughout to be able to go ahead and do any comments or questions. We have people certainly in the session who can respond based on their experiences with SI. We have a lot of expertise attending today, panelists and otherwise. So feel free to make comments and ask questions in the moment. After some of the sessions, we will have an open Q&A session, time permitting. So we'll get to that as well. And I'll be looking at the chat and kind of fielding that. And you'll see me looking to the side often because I have a second computer for some of those tasks. So when I'm not presenting, I'll be doing a lot of head back and forth. A quick glance at our agenda, which most of you should have received through the announcement, but just in case, I'll get out of the way here and turn it over in just a few minutes to Julie Collins, who's going to talk about supplemental instruction, the origins, sort of defining it, setting context, some of the research around it, and some of the main findings about SI. And so that's just sort of to prop up the context for the remaining 3 sessions that we'll have from some of our campus programs. Fresno will be next. Fresno's one of our longest running, largest programs, and so they'll be covering building and sustaining an effective SI program, and you can see some of the goals within there. And then for looking at a little deeper dive on specific data, we're going to feature this year San Diego State and how they applied SI to their chemistry sequence and what the outcomes are. And then last, we'll have a new presentation from Fresno State, and they'll talk about an effective model for implementing virtual SI to increase access for students. So that's just a quick scan of our agenda, and you can see the time chunking that we're doing there. All session recordings and slides will be posted. You'll get that URL multiple times in the session, but I'll also be sending it out to all registrants after the session. So by about Monday, I'll have all the videos ready and all of the slides posted for everyone. So don't worry about taking extensive notes or screen captures or anything like that. If we go too quickly on something, you'll have a chance to come back to it. And just a snapshot of our participation. This is as of early this morning. We have 220 people who have registered for this symposium. Now, we won't get everybody necessarily live. Those are the ones who intended to participate. Some may only be able to attend part of the session. But we have 220 who registered. On top of that, we also have many of the SI coordinators at their campuses hosting viewing events. So we anticipate we have a large number of folks that are attending beyond those that registered as individual participants. And what I ask is any of the SI coordinators, if you want to put into the chat, how many people do you have at your campus? Go ahead and put the campus name and how many people do you have in the room with you if you want to share that. I'll also be collecting attendance from campuses just so I can keep track of how many people have participated and then be able to send all of them the link to the slides. Okay, and last year we were again about 120 people participated on the live session, and we had about another 40 people that participated in the campus group sessions. A pretty large number and even larger this year. Congrats to Dominguez Hills for having the largest turnout. East Bay made a big push last minute overnight. There was some, I think, stuffing of the ballot box, but Dominguez Hills was able to withstand and came out as our leader, so congrats. And you can see we have broad representation across all campuses and even some from outside the CSU attending, a few guests. Okay, and then just a quick snapshot of SI and the CSU, if you will. This is sort of a footprint about SI. I gave a quick survey to the SI coordinators last year and then again this year. I'm sorry, that should say 2019 at the top. I asked them if they followed the UMKC SI model, which you hear a little bit about in a few minutes. Do they follow that to the letter, so to speak? Do they mostly follow that? Do they have some general relation to it, or do they have no relation whatsoever? Now, last year's picture was a little bit more colorful, a little bit more toward the middle or lower half somewhat, where this year you can see that more programs are definitely more in alignment with each other and more in alignment with that UMKC SI model, the capital SI, where in the past we've had sort of lowercase I, or some people even called it twisted SI, happening at campuses. So you have a lot of inconsistency, but now we have this strong community sort of marching together. So that's encouraging to see. And then if you look at the amount of SI happening, you can see in that yellow row there for 2019, this is fresh data as of about a week ago. For 19 campuses self-reporting, we have 884 courses with SI, and you can see the range in number of courses per campus. I didn't put in this table, but they did report about 2,000 sections that have SI, so quite a large number, and then 87,000 students who have access to SI through these courses, and about 1,700 SI leaders who you'll hear about more so. Now, if you just do a glance to last year's numbers, that's a huge jump in SI offering at the campuses individually and collectively. So excellent job of the SI community in really growing their programs. Okay, and then one of the last things I'll do here is just remind you, let me go back one, just remind you to go ahead and use that chat to put in questions or comments at any point during any of the presentations that are taking place, and we'll try and get responses to you either back in the chat or during any of the QA breaks. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause here and go ahead and let you know, let's see, I'll give you the URL later for the slides. I'll introduce our keynote speaker for the day, get back to her slide. Sorry, there's just a little bit of lag time on the response here, it's going. So I want to introduce Dr. Julie Collins, who is the Executive Director for the International Center for SI. She's been in that position about 2 years. She can correct me if I'm significantly off from that, but I believe that's about the time that she's been in her current position. That position also includes being Director of Academic Support and Mentoring at University of Missouri, Kansas City. Besides managing the International Center for SI and all the activities involved in offering training, whether locally there at their hub, or whether on-site elsewhere, or whether globally, Julie and her team have been putting on an international conference that happens biannually, and we'll talk about that in a little bit at the end of her session. We've had many people from the CSU attend that in the past. Julie has been excellent to work with since we've had the collaboration and the partnership with UMKC with the International Center the last couple of years, and her staff is phenomenal, and so I'm really thankful to be working with Julie and having her present to the group today. So Julie, you'll let me know when to advance.
Well, we can leave that slide right away and jump right into some content, but thank you so much, Brett, for the warm introduction, and I would echo that it's been a pleasure partnering with you and Kathy and others that we've come to know Trista, starting to know our CSU partners really well, and it's been an absolute pleasure since I've been here. I think we're one advance too far, perhaps, Brett. Maybe back one. Perfect. So it's always great to begin any conversation about SI with kind of the story of SI. So some of you have heard this before if you've been to our supervisor training or have been maybe on last year's webinar, you heard the story, but it's worth retelling. That in 1973, a graduate student at that time in the School of Education named Deanna Martin, before she was Dr. Deanna Martin, was approached by the provost. I'm always curious as to how that happened. Someday I might find out exactly how she was selected to be approached by the provost, but the university was experiencing a problem to be solved, one that actually we and others still face, which is declining enrollment due to a retention problem. But we had a very specific context at that time, because in 1963, 10 years prior, the University of Missouri Kansas City was the University of Kansas City and was a private institution, very much active in the health science fields. Those are still on our campus today. And so had at that time in 1963 or prior to that, a very selective enrollment process and was not experiencing retention difficulties. But then in 1963 became part of the University of Missouri system and became a public institution. And so while the standards, of course, for admissions were still there, perhaps not as high as they had been, instruction, as I kind of envision it, probably stayed about the same as it had been. And so here was instruction going on and student population was changing and the instruction wasn't changing to adapt to the new needs. And so a huge retention problem was occurring. Deanna Martin, who had, as I said, an education background, began to pull together what a model might look like in order to retain students and to create better academic success. And so the bullet points that you see are really kind of the fundamentals of what she came up with. There's a lot of learning theory behind that, which we don't have time to go into today, but just know that the result was that there would be these study sessions that would be away from class and facilitated by what we now call an SI leader, but a near peer, someone who had been through the course previously, who had demonstrated success in that course, and is now coming back to be a model student, sit alongside students in their classes, and lead sessions that happen away from the class. SI was started and continues to target historically difficult courses as opposed to trying to focus on at-risk students, and because there are a lot of problems with identifying who at-risk students really are. It could be any student. So focusing in on those difficult courses, having those sessions that are designed to elicit high student-to-student engagement where students are interacting with each other and processing material, questioning each other, and the facilitator, that peer leader, is really standing on the side and orchestrating with their plan all of those things to happen. And through those processes then, as doing SI, and many of you are, I love to see the data improve over time, that more of you are doing SI in more courses. But we see the effect of that students are really deepening their understanding and able kind of to teach each other the content, so to speak, and are learning those effective study practices through that process. The International Center then was established in the early 1980s, was when we first started. Didn't start as an international center, started as a national center, to my understanding. So we can advance, Brett, to the next slide. And so some of the elements, some of which I mentioned as I was giving that historical perspective, but the SI is and what it is not. These are really the hallmark pieces that we talk about with SI. Mentioned, as I had just mentioned, that SI is focused on those high-risk courses, not trying to just hone in on high-risk learners. And in fact, all learners, whether they are A students or less than A students in that course, will benefit from the experiences that they have in SI. So it is not a stigmatizing program. It is not just for a certain type of student who might be struggling. It is really intended for all. I talked about the SI leader, the near peer, as opposed to being led by an instructor or a TA or someone who is maybe not a high authority, but kind of that authority figure, that person who is the go-to for the information, because that puts students back in that dependency cycle where they're depending on someone who holds the information. Instead, a near peer facilitates students, again, talking to each other. One of the crucial pieces, anyone who's been through the training knows this, is that SI is planned in advance. It is not one of those free-for-all where you go in and start just throwing out some questions and hopefully have someone who has the answers. It is a well-planned set of activities that are facilitated by that peer leader to really focus in on that most challenging content so that the most challenging content is addressed in the session. I think we talked about, I talked about student-to-student processing of material rather than a re-lecture or a tutoring kind of scenario. We like to think about SI, we actually have in our training, if you've seen that, we have an analogy to an ER type of setting or an urgent care versus yoga, which would be preventative care. So SI is yoga as opposed to an emergency type situation, but SI is preventative, proactive. It is engaged in from the beginning of a term. You don't wait to fail before you get into SI. We'll take you if you do, dear student, but we hope that you are with us from the beginning because it will reinforce those concepts for you. I put little asterisks by two sometimes controversial elements of SI. SI is voluntary and it is anonymous. But there are some exceptions at times to that. So it's intended to be a voluntary. That was how the model was established. We still believe that's the strongest model, but there are times when there are some requirements around that. Certain students may be asked to attend in certain scenarios. So again, with some asterisks, but it is not typically a required program. That is not how we train it. And anonymous in the sense that the information about who attends and how frequently they attend is not intended to go back to instructors, not intended for instructors to really even know who attends. It's something that happens outside of the class. But at the same time, it is not intended to be isolated from faculty. It is a strong partnership in the best cases between the SI leader and the faculty member or instructor so that they help develop that plan together, can reinforce concepts that are important to the instructor, and so on. So it's a strong partnership at its best. And SI, I believe I mentioned, happens outside of the classroom rather than within that classroom setting. So yeah, Brett, you probably have guessed to move forward. Okay, there is that lag time. So just a little bit of information about the impact of SI. In 1992, there was a U.S. Department of Education validation of SI as a high impact practice. And so those three research claims that bear out today, and I'll talk about that in just a moment, higher mean students who participate versus those who don't earn higher mean course grades, even when controlled for certain elements that you see there. Students who also succeed at a higher rate in terms of lower DFW rates. Those who participate have lower withdrawal Ds and Fs, as opposed to, I hope I said that right. I think I might have said that backwards. SI is good, and so those who come to SI have a lower DFW rate. I'll leave it at that. I think I got lost in my own thoughts there for a second. And then finally, students who participate in SI tend to persist, re-enroll, and graduate more so than those students who do not participate. So those are the claims that have been validated not only through this U.S. Department of Education study, but on the next slide, you'll see also those have been reaffirmed in Dawson et al. It's a very large group of researchers who did a review of literature on over 29 studies. And you can see that, we often get the question of, well, of course SI is effective because the students who would go and spend that extra time and attend would be your students who would be higher achievers. And so when that particular self-selection bias is addressed, we are finding that SI is the more important of the two variables that explain the enhanced achievement. So in fact, we can control for self-selection bias with our data. We have data from our campus program that, and I know that the CSU system is heavily engaged in data collection, data analysis around probably all of your initiatives, but as I've come to know it, you're definitely doing a great job of building dashboards and so on to address your impact of SI. On our campus, we are attempting to do the same, and I'm very excited about a partnership that we have. It happens to be product-based. I'm not selling the product. I get no royalties from the Civitas folks, but just know that a product called Civitas Illume, and then within that, there is a particular program called Impact. So Civitas Illume Impact is the program that we've been using. And I'm starting with a kind of an older study, but the one that we have talked about, we talked about at our conference, and we're very, very excited about the results, comes from 2016 or 2016-17 or FY17 data. And what Civitas does is allows us to do that propensity score matching of like students. And that's not anything new. I mean, those of you who research and do these things know about those types of studies. The difference is with Civitas is that we're able to match not only on key demographics that you might think of, ethnicity, student type of enrollment, whether transfer, first year, or first time college, just the typical demographics. So not only those demographics, but also Civitas holds for us each student's past prediction score. So what is their trajectory toward persistence as it exists for those particular students? And so by matching students who not only have those key demographics, but also have similar or like prediction scores, we can see with greater definity the impact that SI as an intervention actually has had. Brett, you want to go ahead and move forward on that? And so for this FY17 study, we had, and kind of the bottom line is in green at the bottom of the slide, an overall 9% lift in persistence. So that's taking the average of all the students that were included within this particular study. You can see how many pairs of students, so you get an idea of the N. The N has to be significant in order for Civitas to do its work. And you can see not only the lift, but then within that 95% confidence interval, what that lift in persistence came out to be based on the intervention of SI. It was even greater, or the greatest impact, by the way, or as I'm mentioning, is part-time students, Black or African-American students, Hispanic, Latino. Those were our largest impact groups. So I just came from another institution that is really seeking something not only to lift, raise the boat for all students, raise that persistence rate for all students, but they're particularly concerned about their underserved populations. And so we have data that indicates that, yes, this is a highly effective intervention, again, for all students. And by focusing on all students, we are also able to make that impact with the at-risk students. So even though the intervention isn't intended to focus on at-risk, it will help with that retention for the at-risk student. And even more exciting is money. So I've talked a lot of data, and I hope I didn't lose anyone. I hope, wake up. If you fell asleep during the data, wake up, because I'm about to tell you how much revenue you'll actually save or are saving because you're doing SI. And perhaps you're engaged in this kind of ROI or return on investment study on your own campuses. But for us, this was really, really exciting news. We looked at 17-18, so FY18 or AY18 year, and had 1,640 matched pairs. So I just talked about those matched pairs in that kind of Civitas study. And what we found is that because we were able to retain students at that higher rate, so that persistence lift, within a year, we retained, by virtue of having SI, by students attending 3 or more sessions of SI, our annual return on investment in 1 year was $590,000. I'm just going to let that soak in a second, because I believe you will get the same results. With a high quality program, you will get similar results. We have a very high quality program. We're a flagship program, and our coordinator, Jessica Elam, couldn't do a better job of coordinating our program. So I know results will vary. I think that's a little catchphrase that people use. But this is actual money that, based on tuition and fees that we would have lost, we have actually saved. Now, I'm still trying to parlay that into a building for SI or something tangible that it helps students even more. And that's not how it works yet. But just to know, this is the kind of information, and I'm sure you're already thinking about this, that you can use with your stakeholders. If you're needing to convince faculty members, decision makers to start incorporating SI because retention is an issue for everyone, this actually shows them that their investment will pay off. And that's kind of how we've used the data here on our campus with the support of our provost. And so it gets even better. So if you kind of play that on out, the last, well, I don't know that it gets better actually. These are students who didn't attend 3 or more, but if they had, they were attendees of just 1 or 2 sessions. By attending just up to that 3 mark, we would have we would have earned an additional $960,000 or retained an additional $960,000. So again, just more impetus to really promote SI as an instructor. If you're an instructor for an SI course, to really, of course, it's about the student's performance. That's always first, but also know that there will be a return on investment for your academic unit by having more students participate more frequently in SI. And we have data that shows it, and it's pretty exciting. Oh, okay, there, whoops, a little too far. Some international center news first, I think, Brett, so maybe back up. Was it 1 or 2 slides? There we go. Just as an international center, just to let you know kind of what we do in case this is new information for you. As the International Center here at UMKC, we have a network of international partnerships in 4 other countries: Sweden, Canada, South Africa, and Australia. And South Africa actually has both a national and a regional center. So we partner with 5 other institutions across the globe. Our goal is to proliferate SI research and best practice. We've just started engaging, re-engaging, I think, because research had been a little bit lacking here for a fair amount of time here at the International Center. And so we're re-engaging in some studies here on our campus, but also with some research projects involving our international partners. So that's exciting. Hopefully those studies will be written up within the next year or so, and I'll have more information to share with you. And then we also really want to support and be advocates for professional dialogue that can happen. We think that's one of the best ways for change and for innovation, is for people to engage just like you are today with each other, sharing your stories, asking questions of each other. And so SINet is one way to do that. I think you have your own CSU net of some sort, which sounds awesome as well. But please, if you are not currently subscribed to SINet, just consider doing so that you can peek in, you can take a look at the archives of discussions. If you have questions, chances are other people have encountered those or would be willing to engage in conversation with you about that. We are predominantly, I'm keeping an eye on time, Brett, so don't worry, I'm gonna get there. But we are predominantly a training and support institution, so you can see that we have various trainings, and I know that you're aware of those in many cases because you've either attended training here or maybe been engaged in training that we've come to you. And I think Jess has come to you once, and maybe 1 or 2 more times. We've got Jess coming your way, so that'll be great for those of you who can attend that. A couple things to let you know: program certification is now becoming accreditation. It will start to be known as ICSI accreditation. And so the same kinds of concepts around promoting best practices for SI, your pie chart that showed whether you're following the UMKC model, all of those things are within the rubric that we have online to let you know what are the standards and kind of the core ideas that would make an SI program truly an SI program. So accreditation, a little bit of a ratchet up in terms of terminology. And so that process is starting very soon. And I'm very excited to announce, and Brett, we can go ahead and move to the next slide. SI awareness webinars. We're starting our first, we hope to have more webinar opportunities in the future that are even beyond this, but this is kind of our first attempt to do a webinar, and it will be Tuesday, March 26th. It is just an hour, so it's really just that really critical information. What's SI? Who's involved? How does it work? So a great opportunity for very busy people who may have heard about SI, they may have misperceptions and so on, and you may want to invite them to be a part of this. We will also record it just like you are, so that those who cannot attend live can get that recording. But just that very fundamental, basic information, a little bit of Q&A, but we know we probably won't get it as in-depth as some people might want, but just to continue that conversation about what is SI and how would we even go about starting to implement on our campus. So you have information there. I know it'll be archived within this webinar, so you can feel free to register, look at our website, or contact any of us here at the center. We'd be glad to help you get involved with that. And ending on a beautiful picture of what outside of our window is going to look like in Baltimore, Maryland, June 4th through 6th, 2020. So we have biannual conferences, as Brett mentioned at the onset. The next one is already slated for a beautiful venue in Baltimore, the Inner Harbor. We hope to see as large or larger a contingency. And, you know, we also hope to see probably some presentations from this team, as well as possibly some award nominees or award winners, as has been your hallmark as a CSU system. We know that you are very invested, and we love seeing you in person whenever we can. So hopefully you'll join us in Baltimore in 2020. And Brett, I get an award for hitting the mark, I think, on time, maybe a minute over.
Yeah, a minute over is nothing. Thank you so much, Julie, for the update and the information, and I hope that was useful to everybody, just to give you that historical context and the validating data from, you know, the International Center and the meta-analyses that have been performed. And we certainly have a lot of data from our campuses that really mirror those patterns, and it's great to see that continuing as we go forward. I can speak very briefly about collaborations we've had with the International Center and some of the things that we're currently doing or will be doing as we go forward. We're going to continue to offer regional training in the CSU, and in a moment I'll announce one of those sessions, and a little bit later in the presentation today I can announce another one as well. We're actually certifying SI trainers within the CSU to help meet our ongoing demands as we continue to scale SI. And that's going to help us to have some of those regional local sessions where people are going to be able to get to those more readily. We're looking at collaborating on large-scale data analysis. Obviously, there's a lot of great potential there. Potentially offering a regional SI conference. So in those in-between years, maybe looking to offer something that's CSU or West Coast, certainly. And we also tend to keep pushing the envelope in terms of leveraging technology, doing tracking, assessment, dissemination, those types of things. So we'll continue to work forward. They've been a pleasure to work with. And again, thank you, Julie, for your time today. I know you've got something else to run to pretty soon. Maybe folks would have some comments or questions in the chat. And what I'll do is I'll keep us going forward here with one of the announcements that I'll give between each of the sessions. So we do have a Southern Regional SI training. It is a 2-day training, April 3rd, 4th at CSU Fullerton. We'll also have a Northern Regional training, June 20th through 21st at Sacramento State. And I'll talk about the conference that's in conjunction with. The trainings themselves are appropriate for SI supervisors, staff, and faculty. So it's very broadly applicable as far as audience. The Chancellor's Office pays for the cost of the training and materials, which is regularly $875, plus it's going to happen locally, so travel is going to be fairly minimal for most of you. We simply ask that the attendee or the campus pay for the travel costs and any additional meals that incur, but we will take care of the on-site costs of the training and hospitality and materials. So I will send you in the chat here in a moment, once I get Fullerton going, I will send you a link to the professional development page for SI within our SI website, and you can find out more